Today's program is part of the award-winning series Profiles in Literature, featuring interviews with persons prominent in American literature for children. The moderator of this series is Dr. Jaqueline Shachter Weiss.
Today we focus on two celebrities, artist-illustrator John Schoenherr and prolific author of books for young people, Jane Yolen. In addition to literary interests, among your common denominators is the fact that you both live in farmhouses. John, where is yours located?
Mine is located in rustic Stockton, New Jersey.
I see. This is a beautiful wintry scene. Jane, where is your home?
I live in Hatfield, Massachusetts, a small town in western Massachusetts.
Is your studio or your office on the third floor?
Yes, we turned the entire attic over to me when it became clear that 3 teenagers were too much to cope with.
Joining us is my Profiles colleague, Carolyn Field, Coordinator Emerita of the Office of Work with Children of the Free Library of Philadelphia.
Taken us several years to arrange this interview, so you know I'm happy to see both of you.
Jane, who is this rugged man? Where was he raised? And what is his occupation?
The original Pa in Owl Moon is my husband, David Stemple, who is now a professor of computer science, but actually he was raised in the mountains of West Virginia. He was a real mountaineer.
If he is the reader, the faithful reader of all your manuscripts, how many has that been?
Well, there are 113 books published. There are 39 under contract, and there are lots that have never seen the light of day, except for David.
Very impressive. Please introduce us to your 3 children, telling us their ages and vocations.
My daughter Heidi is 25. She's a probation officer in the Fort Lauderdale area. My son Adam is a musician in a band called Poetic Justice, and he also has done 4 books with me and 1 book on his own, writing the musical arrangements. And my youngest son is 21, and that's Jason, and he's in college. He has a graphic arts degree, and he's going for a business degree now, and he's a photographer as well.
Oh, fine. Adam is among the balladeers in your life, including your father and brother, to whom you dedicated Tam Lin, your 1990 Scottish picture storybook. Who did the illustrations?
That was Charles Michalajczyk, and he did a gorgeous job, very romantic. It's one of the most romantic of the fairy ballads.
Since you're an accomplished folk singer in your own right, please sing a couple of lines from the great Selchi, telling us first, what is a Selchi?
Well, they're pronounced Selchi or Selkie, depending upon who you talk to. The Selkie is a transfigurative creature out of folklore, sometimes a human being and sometimes a seal. When they're on land, they are humans, and when they're in the sea, they're seals. It's a Scottish notion, and I fell in love with the folk ballad when I was about 16. And the operative and most important part of that ballad, I think, comes, and I'll tell you the words first because you might not understand them when they're sung. I am a man upon the land, I am a selkie, a seal, in the sea. And when I'm far from every strand, when I'm far from every sandy beach, my dwelling is on Soul Skerry, and Soul Skerry is a group of rocks off the Scottish coast. And the song goes, I am a man upon the land, I am a selkie in the sea, and when I'm far and far frae land, my dwelling is in Soul Skerry.
Oh,
Ooh,
lovely.
Good.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Versatile Jane's husband did figure in as the original Pa, as you stated, in Owl Moon, the picture storybook that you dedicated to him. John Schoenherr illustrated Owl Moon so effectively, it brought him this Caldecott Medal in 1988 from the American Library Association. In the first page of Owl Moon, we see a beautiful luminescent watercolor. Whose house is in that scene?
Well, the house is mine. My wife and I live there, and I also used neighboring buildings. It's not our actual farm.
In back of the house is your studio, I believe. In actuality.
In actuality, it's
Yes.
a much smaller barn. Yes.
I see. Your granddaughter, Nissa Hargrave, is the person to whom you dedicated the illustrations in Owl Moon. Please introduce us to other family members in a picture you sent.
Well, we have my son, Ian, who is now 25 or 6 and is a budding illustrator working on his first illustrated book. My daughter, Jennifer, is the mother of Nissa, and now Emily, another little addition.
And your wife is
My wife,
also in
Judy,
that
is in
picture.
there.
Judy.
Yes.
From about 1980 to 87, roughly, you focused on painting. We show photos of 2 magazine shots out of many masterpieces of wildlife art. In this photo of feathered fowl called Fatherly Pride, what animals are featured?
Well, this was wild Canada geese.
Canadian geese.
Right. We
Canada geese.
Canada geese.
Canada
yes.
geese, right. And in your acrylic, the other one was an oil, in your acrylic, Otter on the Rocks, where did you do that painting?
Okay, well, the setting for it, the otters were generic otters, or Canada otters again, but the setting was inspired by some rock formations along the Opalescent River in the Adirondacks.
Oh,
So,
the Adirondack.
John, an editor drew you back into illustration. In this picture, taken at an international literary conference, she is standing on the far right. What is her name?
Pat Gouch, I believe.
Patty Gouch, that's right. And she lured you back with what manuscript?
She lured me back with a very slim manuscript named Owl Moon.
Owl Moon.
Thank goodness.
Yeah. Jane, is the child in Owl Moon a boy or a girl?
That's my daughter Heidi.
It's your daughter Heidi.
That's my daughter Heidi, and actually it could have been any of our children because our husband has taken them all out owling.
How true are the details in Owl Moon?
The details are all true, though they didn't actually all happen at the exact same time, and clearly this child has older brothers and Heidi has younger brothers, but the emotional content and the way you go out owling is very true.
John, stalking owls must seem tame to you. Tell us about some of your experiences photographing the large animals for those huge portrait gallery paintings that you've done.
Well, mostly I've been painting grizzly bears and brown bears. And I go to Alaska and watch them and photograph them and study them, and eventually come back and make a painting.
And use the photographs as your basis for...
I use them as a model instead of
As a
something
model.
to copy directly. Yeah.
Well, you must have had some adventurous times photographing these wild animals. But you were already drawing animals such as the skunk in the barn, which was the first book that you wrote and illustrated,
Right.
and the playful raccoon in Norse Rascal, and one of my favorites, the Alaska Wolves in Julie of the Wolves, which won the 1973 Newbery Medal. How many books have you illustrated?
I think I'm up to number 47 now.
47. Well, that's certainly something. You've been in demand. Now we're showing a picture of the 1991 book, which you wrote and illustrated, called Bear. What was your theme in this book?
The theme was a season in the life of a bear, and that it's not just a given that they will have a happy life. They have to work for it. Even though they're probably the largest, most powerful carnivores in the area, it's still touch and go. And they need to learn. They're not born with the ability to survive. So.
Thank you. On to you, Jane. You're an editor now of books with your own imprint. For what company?
For Harcourt Brace Jovanovich.
Okay.
Now, you're probably best known, Jane, for your literary folk tales. The Emperor and the Kite, which was illustrated by Ed Young, and which was a 1968 Caldecott honor book. Which family member is interested in kites?
That was my father. He was at one point the international kite flying champion. And
oh my.
He won his international kite flying championhood at the palace of the Maharaja of Bharatpur, the hunting palace, on the green sward in front of the palace. And the Maharaja's kite bearer put his kite up and handed the kite string to the Maharaja, and my father put his own kite up.
Oh,
or at least
isn't that
that's how the
wonderful?
stories go.
That's exciting. But tell me, how do you get such fine illustrators, Caldecott medal winners like John Schoenherr and Ed Young?
You have to rely on your editors, because John and I didn't even get to meet until 4 months after the Caldecott was announced.
Really?
Yeah, yeah. Most of the time, the author does his or her work, and then the illustrator does his or her work, and they meet afterwards, if at all.
You can't suggest.
Well, I'm at a point now where I can suggest, but in fact, I knew John's work quite well, being a science fiction fan as well, because he did the original Dune work on the book Dune, as well as Rascal and Gentle Ben and Julie of the Wolves, and I knew all those books. But as far as I knew, he was out of the book business. I didn't even know he was alive.
Oh.
And it was the editor, who was a neighbor of his, who said,
thought it.
"What do you think of his work?" And my eyes got big, and I said, "Oh, he's wonderful. Is he alive?"
He is.
For The Seeing Stick, another literary folk tale in symbolic form with carefully chosen words, this time in free verse. Oh, incidentally, free verse was used for Owl Moon, too. Your illustrators, Remy Charlap and Dimitra Maraslas, first showed blind Princess Wee Ming in black and white, and later, when she developed a so-called way of seeing, they switched to colored drawings. The Seeing Stick is such a sensitive book. It won the Christopher Award. How do readers react to it?
Oh, I still get people coming up. The book has been published a long time ago, and it may even be out of print now, I'm not positive. But I still get people coming up who tell me, that the last line just made them cry. In fact, the last line wasn't there when I originally wrote it. I read it to my writers group, and one of the women said, "I think I'm missing something. Is the old man blind?" And I said, oh, yes, of course he is, and immediately put that in and threaded that idea all the way through. It was really there, but underneath, and she helped me bring it out.
It's an excellent piece.
It's a beautiful, beautiful book.
Thank you.
Your easily read, popular Commander Toad in Space. It was a Garden State Children's Book Award winner. Now this whole series is in free verse, sprinkled with puns. You seem to be a great punster.
Oh dear.
Now, how many revisions of a manuscript do you have to do?
Oh, I would say on the average anywhere from about 10 to about 30. You hope when you write it that it looks easy and as if all the words fell together absolutely perfectly. But it's like, I think, any kind of, say, sport or dancing where you have to practice and practice and practice to make it look like it's simple.
Do you have to do more revisions for these simple stories than you do for your literary folk tales?
No, those are about the same. I think I do more revisions, though, on my short fiction and my poetry than I do on my novels.
Dreamweaver contains the boy who sang for death. Who did you have in mind when you wrote that?
Well, when I wrote it, I didn't know I had anyone in mind. When I reread reread it after I had finished writing it, I realized that the story was about my mother, who had died 8 years earlier. But there's a line in there where the boy says to the priest, any gift I have, meaning his voice, any gift I have, I would give to get my mother back. Mm-hmm. And when I read that line aloud, sitting in my kitchen with no one else around, I started crying because I realized the book was about her.
Mm-hmm. Another story about death, The Devil's Arithmetic, was your 1988 Holocaust story. It's been translated into German in Vienna. What prizes has it won?
Well, it won both the Jewish Book Council Award and the Association of Jewish Libraries Award. It was an honor book on several other kinds of awards, but in some ways the award that means the most to me is it won an award from the German children.
Oh.
And for that to have happened meant an awful lot.
Yes, yes it did.
You know, I'm a great fantasy and science fiction fan, and I just love the trilogy of Dragon's Blood. Whatever got you interested in dragons and science fiction and fantasy like that?
I've been reading that stuff
Dragons?
ever since I was
Really?
a little kid, yeah. And I actually started with a short story that was about that world and fighting dragons in pits, and decided I wanted to know more. But no one else could write about them because they were my dragons and my world. The only one who could write a book that I could read would be me, so I had to write it. And it grew into 3 books. And now I get letters from kids all the time who want a 4th book. And I expect that some year...
Yeah, I do too. I want the 4th book.
I expect some year I will.
Well, you also seem to refer to dictionaries on dragons. Are these your own dictionaries and encyclopedias
Yes.
that you make up?
I made up the
made 'em
Encyclopedia
up.
Galactica. Yes.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Another one of your humorous, easy-to-read series is the Piggins books. Now, Piggins is a crime-solving butler pig who lives in an animal world that is very much like our upper crust world of human beings. Do you think that children really understand this upstairs, downstairs
Well, the
situation?
The book has won 2 awards given by children, the New York State Award and the Nebraska State Award, both voted on by children. And every time I go into schools, they voted on their most favorite of my book, and Piggins seems to get it every time. So I think, yes, I think children like it.
They do understand
They
it.
love to solve the mystery before Piggins does.
Well, you must have, what, 20 publishers?
I've never counted, actually.
But it seems to me when I was looking over your bibliography, you had a tremendous number of publishers. And tell me, why do you have so many publishers?
Well, first of all, there's no publisher who wants to publish 8 books of mine a year. They'd have to change their name to Harper, Brace, Jovanovich and Yolen, or Harper, Collins, Yolen, or Little, Brown and Yolen, or Putnam's and Yolen, and no one's going to do that. Second of all, when an editor that you love very much and you've worked very successfully with leaves and goes to another publishing company, you follow, but you leave some books at the one publishing company and you go and follow the editor, because you're really more loyal to the editor than you are to the publishing company.
Do you think, you've been in publishing now quite a long time, do you think that the editors today in the publishing houses know as much about editing as they did, say, in the 30s, 40s, and 50s?
I think they may know more about editing and less about the history of children's literature.
Oh,
And what I really miss, because I've taught children's literature at Smith College, I really miss a breadth of understanding of the movements in children's literature, the amazing transformations that have gone on. They know maybe the last 10 or 15 years or however long they've been in publishing, but they don't know where publishing for children started. They don't know anything about the great golden era of children's books.
The 30s, 40s, and 50s, the Mae Massey and
they don't know
Peggy
that.
Lesser.
And I really, you know,
Margaret McElderry still...
she's it.
She still belongs to that age. And she was also a librarian, as you know, a children's librarian. You're also very busy, beside writing, speaking. You have classes. How do you manage your time? I just can't understand how you do so many things and write, say, 8 books a year.
Carolyn, people ask me that all the time, and I tell them that there's a time fairy, and if you're very, very
Time
good,
fairy.
and you leave a quarter under your pillow, the time fairy will give you an extra hour or 2 a day.
That's a lot.
I don't know. I mean, it seems to me to make as much sense as anything else.
Well, it just seems to me when I look at all you do and hear about all the things you do when you're around the country speaking and so on. And I know that John is busy as can be, both with his painting and now with your book Bear. Are you working on another book, John?
Yes, I'm working at writing another longer piece about Paleo-Indians in New Jersey.
About the what Indian?
Paleo-Indians, the
Oh,
first
in New
inhabitants
Jersey.
that-
And you will and illustrate, will it be a picture book?
I have no idea.
You don't know. You're just working on
I'm
it.
up to page 8.
Oh, good.
Early times.
Right.
Early times, old days.
Do you have a contract for a book before you write the book, or do you have to send in to your publishers outline and maybe a first chapter?
I've
What?
done it every way.
You do-
I actually prefer finishing a book to, certainly a novel, I would rather finish before I've sent it, before I get a contract for it, because you never know how a novel's going to turn out. A nonfiction book I can do on an outline, but picture books, very often you really also need to see how it molds itself to get a contract ahead of time, and I'm certainly at a place where I can get a contract ahead of time. Makes me very nervous.
Well, now, as an author of a picture book, you send in your manuscript, and then you get your contract. Then do they work on the illustrator, or
No, then they
have
make
they
you
already
revise
made that decision?
They make you revise it and revise it and revise it. And when they're happy with the revisions, this is after you've done all your 10 or 15 or 20 revisions on your own, and then they will have you revise it 3, 4, 5 more times as necessary. And then they will be probably simultaneously looking for a proper illustrator. They will have consulted you and maybe shown you some samples. And then when you have really pretty much the finished manuscript, that's not going to change except for a word or 2 more, then the illustrator gets started making a book dummy.
Now, John, do the editors ever make you redo your illustrations?
Not as often as I make myself redo them.
Oh, you get the manuscript,
I get the manuscript.
and they tell you how much space you have and whether you have full pages or what, or do you make that decision?
There's a basic layout to the book. They'll decide on the size or consult and get something equitable. And then you make a dummy with rough sketches and seeing where the type will go.
You send the dummy in to the editor, or the art director?
Art director.
Art director.
Or both.
And they both look at
They
it?
both look at it and tell you where you're completely wrong and where it's nice, and if at all, and some other stuff.
Now, do you get your contract before you start work?
You should, yes.
You should.
Yeah, but by then the book is already in progress, in the process of being published. So,
Well, I think what people don't realize is that there is much more to bookmaking than sitting in front of your typewriter or word processor or drawing desk. That so much of it is head work before you ever get anything set down. And when people ask me, how long do you work, for example, well, I may be at my desk 1 or 2 or 4 or 6 or 8 hours in a day, but I'm thinking about books 24 hours.
Well, I was just going to ask you about your schedule of work. You have a word processor, is that what you use?
No, I don't know how to use
What
a
do you
word
do?
processor. I use a typewriter.
A typewriter. Oh, that's nice. And do you have certain times during the day when you work? Or
Well, my head stops working about 3 in the afternoon. I work from about 6 or 7 in the morning till around noon, take a break, sometimes walk, sometimes do my errands then, and then go back from about 2 to 4 or 5 when I'm editing. And I do my editing in the afternoon because I can edit when my brain doesn't work, but I can't write when my brain doesn't work.
Have you ever had any rejections?
Oh, I have drawers full of rejections.
Have you
Really?
Of course. I still get them.
You don't. do you, John? You don't have rejection.
Yes, well, we get it in another way. It's when paintings come back from galleries and say, this is really unsaleable.
You mean, oh, that it hadn't been
We're no longer
sold?
interested.
I think it's important for children to understand that just because you were, quote, successful, it doesn't mean that you're not still struggling and you're not still working at getting better every single day of your life. And it's sometimes you wake up in the middle of the night and you think, tomorrow's going to be the day they're going to discover that I'm a fake, and they're going to make me give back all the prizes, and they're going to make me buy back all the books, and they're going to make me take back all the manuscripts.
Well, I guess that's like in any position, but when I think of you as publishing, we'll say 8 books a year, I can't imagine you could produce enough to have any rejection. But I'm
Just about 2
hard.
weeks ago, I got a picture book rejected. So
You didn't?
Yeah,
Oh.
yeah. That's not to say it won't sell somewhere else.
No, somewhere else.
That means
Yeah.
that someone had the bad judgment to turn
Yes,
it down.
they were
Right.
They were
Owl
wrong.
Moon was turned down by 2 publishers.
Oh my
No.
goodness, I
Oh,
can't
great.
believe that. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to say thank you. In addition to previously cited awards, Jane Yolen won the World Fantasy Award, the Golden Kite Award, and for the body of her work, the Curlin Award from the University of Minnesota. John Schoenherr won the Hugo World Science Fiction Award, Best of Show at the Philadelphia Wildlife Art Exhibition, and twice medals from the Society of Animal Artists. Both put themselves in their work, fulfilling Yolen's words in her book, Dreamweaver. What is art but the heart and soul made visible? Both skillfully show their feelings through their work. Thank you.
Thank you.
La 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 la.